Thousands of people rallied in the capital of Myanmar, Naypyidaw, on Sunday to denounce last week's coup. They demanded the release of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi in the biggest protests since the 2007 Saffron Revolution that helped lead democratic reforms.
Tens of thousands rallied across Myanmar for a second day on Sunday to denounce last week's coup and demand the release of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The protests are the biggest the country has seen in over a decade. Crowds filled the streets of Myanmar's biggest city, Yangon, sporting red shirts, flags and balloons, the colour of Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party. Many gestured with a three-finger salute, which has become a symbol of protest against the coup.
We have a right to show our disagreement that we're against the dictatorships to prevent inequality, oppressions, in accordance with the democracy. We need to get rid of the fear. I take part in this revolution as I believe that the military dictatorship will fail if we bravely join forces.
There was no comment from the junta in the capital Naypyidaw, some 220 miles north of Yangon. In the southeastern town of Myanmar, shots were heard as armed police tried to break up a large crowd. It was not immediately clear if there had been any casualties. On Sunday afternoon, the junta ended a day-long blockade of the internet that had further inflamed anger. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Myanmar has said more than 160 people have been arrested since Monday's coup. The military takeover has halted the Southeast Asian nation's troubled transition to democracy and drawn international outrage.
Commentator Mabrur Ahmed is the Director of Restless Beings, an international human rights organization which aims to support marginalized communities that are deprived of media or public attention. He joins us now via Skype from London. Mr. Ahmed, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Thank you for having me.
What's your understanding of what's currently happening in Myanmar? I mean, we understand that the ousted leader, Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi, has been placed under house arrest. Has she been charged? And if so, what charges?
Yes, she has been charged, and it's quite a funny charge that she's been charged with, actually. It's not anything like sedition or anything like this. She's been with possession of walkie-talkies. Essentially, she's been charged by the military government of communicating with Western powers through walkie-talkies. And so this isn't really a serious charge in that way. This is just kind of getting through some sort of legislation to charge her with anything but. The main reason why they've decided to keep her behind bars as such. Of course, she's actually under house arrest and not in a prison. And that the main reason why they have ousted her and they have taken her under arrest is because they don't want her to run a legitimate, kind of democratically elected government.
Now, Min Aung Hlaing is the leader of the coup. Do we know at this point whether he's assembled his own government to take the country forward to the next election, which they deem to be free and fair?
Yes, he has actually formed a cabinet. Look, if you're looking at it from an international relations diplomacy perspective, a cabinet which can be taken seriously, and no international government should engage in any sort of diplomatic relations with this government that's been assembled. It is an assembly of mostly military personnel, and of course, none of these officials which have been kind of promoted into this cabinet have actually been democratically elected. And so it goes against the spirit of democracy, and it goes against the spirit of having elections in the first place. He has said, Min Aung Hlaing has said that he hopes and aspires to conduct free and fair elections within a year. That in itself is a bit of a fallacy, because even the elections which were held in November, which Suu Kyi and the NLD party won, can't really be claimed to be free and fair, because mostly when you look at elections around the world and what we accept to be free and fair elections around the world, it means that all seats of the parliament will be contested for fairly. Now, within the Myanmar constitution, only 25% of those seats are actually reserved for military. And so there's no way that we can actually even describe what had happened before or anything going forward to be free and fair.
Now, the military says it will hold a free and fair election once the state of emergency is over. Remember that the Electoral Commission declared last year's election as free and fair. One then wonders, Mr. Ahmed, what the expected outcome of the election was for the army to dispute the legitimacy of these elections.
Well, look, the way the Myanmar constitution is written is such that 25%, as I said, of the seats in parliament are reserved for the military. What the military actually wanted to do, Min Aung Hlaing, the aspiration was that the Union Solidarity Development Party, which is basically a military proxy party, is to win 25% of the remaining seats and therefore hold a 50% majority lead in the House of Representatives. But of course, Suu Kyi's party, NLD, won almost 80%, or just over 80% of those seats, actually. And so therefore, the military would have lost that final control, the 50% control. But of course, they still had the veto power in most of the major departments that they hold, the Ministry of Home, the Ministry of Border, and the Ministry of Defense. And so the coup itself was regarded somewhat, it was a strange decision because the military already had control and they already had a veto power. So it was whether or not the military could live with some degree of civilian government, and they chose this moment to say no, they couldn't. And many commentators and many analysts have actually said one of the reasons perhaps why the coup was kind of launched at this particular time is because of the upcoming ICC case against International Criminal Court case against Myanmar, which has been launched about the Rohingya genocide.
Did the coup have to do with Myanmar's treatment of the Rohingya minority?
Yeah, I mean, we know already that the genocide was committed against them in 2017. It's the same military which is actually now, made this move for military coup as well. So this military cannot be trusted in any way, shape or form. It's committed ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity against some of the other ethnic communities in Myanmar as well, the Karen, the Kachin and the Shan. And actually, under the current conditions of the coup, no one in Burma is safe, but especially the ethnic communities are very much at the front line of any potential disruption that may come up in the coming days. We are in a very dangerous part of this coup. Obviously, the internet has been shut down for a few days now. There are mass protests on the streets, and there is a deep fear that the military is about to become very violent towards the protesters.
Well, there's been serious international condemnation coming from all fronts, with the United Kingdom, with the European Union and Australia all condemning this coup, and with US President Joe Biden threatening to reimpose sanctions. But interestingly, Mr. Ahmed, China has actually blocked a UN Security Council statement condemning the coup. Why do you think this is the case, and what could possibly be China's interest in the whole impasse that's brewing in Myanmar?
Well, initially, China did block that statement. Eventually, a statement was released on Friday, I believe, which was from the UN Security Council, which essentially condemned the actions of the military. The reason why China up until now, and probably going forward, will not kind of back the rest of the UN Security Council is because they have deep economic ties within the country. So even in the region of where the Rohingya have been displaced from, there is huge Chinese investment in gas pipelines and in an economic trade zone in that particular area as well. Not only that, the international community sees Myanmar as a country which has recently, from 2012 onwards, really come out of pariah state, and there's been lots of foreign investment in the country. But, to be fair, the main country, the number one ally and the number one trading partner of Myanmar is China, and China does not want to lose this ally in the region and this huge investment opportunity for them in the region. And so therefore, they will mostly block most of the UN Security Council's moves. I must also say and add at this moment that while there has been condemnation from the UK, US, the EU, Australia, etc., none of that condemnation has materialized in anything solid at the moment. And considering the very fast and very dangerous nature of this coup, it can be very reasonably expected that sanctions should already have not only just been threatened, but actually already been imposed. And you know, I think this is a potential political leverage area going forward. But very soon, if the military does decide to take action against the protesters and it does turn violent and bloodshed is lost, then I fear that those sanctions may come too little, too late.
Well, granted that China does not want to, violate the current trade pact between the two countries, but why would China then block any, or rather oppose any international intervention in Myanmar and simply saying that all parties should resolve their differences?
Well, again, like I said, I think we have to look at the geopolitical arena here. If there is a widespread or if an international condemnation and therefore sanctions on Myanmar, China themselves will lose out because they would have to join the rest of the UN Security Council. And that's why up until this point, even during the genocide, we must, I don't want to compare the two things, but a genocide is the crime of crimes. It's when people are deliberately exterminated. And we know that more than 35,000 Rohingya were deliberately exterminated and more than 1 million people were pushed over into another country. At that time, the UN Security Council failed to even impose any sort of resolution, let alone any action. So at this moment in time for the coup, and I'm not trying to say that, I'm not trying to diminish the seriousness of the coup, but the crime of crimes didn't see a resolution. So it's very unlikely, and we can't expect, I don't think at this moment in time, for the UN Security Council to issue a resolution on Myanmar. Having said that, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't. Absolutely, there should be resolutions placed on, a UN security resolution placed on Myanmar right now. And there should be a halting of any sort of trade, especially arms trade. But again, like I said, looking at precedent, looking at history, I wouldn't expect that to be the case in the coming days.
What does it mean then for Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi? I mean, is she likely to bounce back after this impasse? And just judging from the amount of support that she currently enjoys with the millions of those residents and citizens of Myanmar, remember that the National League for Democracy saw them win more than 80% of the vote.
Absolutely. I think this is a very interesting point that you raised. I think Myanmar, has got a question of identity, I suppose, that it must deal with in the coming days in the middle of this revolution, shall we call it. Does it really, is Myanmar, are the people of Burma coming together so that they can protest against the military? Are they coming together in support of the NLD? Are they coming together in support of Suu Kyi, or are they coming together in support of democracy? Now, if it's against the military, I think all ethnic groups, all people of Burma are against the military. If it's for support of the NLD or Suu Kyi, I think there might be a difference of opinion going forward. I really think that, especially with the younger generation, and this is the younger generation that are leading this revolution in this time, I think there's a real question of how do we put together a democratic system, a constitution, which addresses not only the military's control, not only free and fair elections, but also that of ethnic communities. We have to understand and remember, of course, that Burma is very, very unique in its ethnic makeup. It has more than 135 different ethnicities which make up that country. And I think the struggle of the ethnic people alongside the struggle against the military, as well as democracy, all come together, and we're in a melting pot where I really do believe that if there is going to be a revolution as such, then it will be a revolution on democracy as opposed to a revolution for Suu Kyi or the NLD.
Well, since the international community is seemingly non-committal with what's happening in Myanmar, and save for simply condemning the coup that took place last week, and since there is no likely action to be taken against the military, do the residents and the citizens of Myanmar have the power to change the current status quo?
Well, I think firstly, why there isn't and there won't be any international kind of coming together is probably because a lot of the trade arms, the arms trade, is done through countries like Israel, France, Ukraine, India, even China, especially. And so this is the reason why there's not going to be any international kind of understanding or sanctions placed on Myanmar. The next part of your question: can Myanmar essentially change from within? Well, in previous times in the history of Myanmar, especially in recent history, in 1988, there was a revolution. In 2007, especially, there was a revolution that led to a changing of the constitution. I really do believe there is the appetite. I do believe there is the talent. There is definitely the anger and the passion right now within Myanmar and the Burmese people to want change. And so I am hopeful, actually, that the general public in Myanmar can instigate change. But I think in order to make sure that that change actually sticks and that change is realistic going forward, that's where the international community is needed. And that's where the international community is going to need to stand up and support any potential revolution and mass protest that's coming from the Burmese people.
We know that the internet has since been restored in that country, and we know that Facebook became the digital tea shop, as it's called in Myanmar. And when the military asked for it to be blocked for the sake of stability, I mean, it sent so much shockwaves in the country. Why is Facebook so popular?
Well, I think with Facebook, it's very important to remember. With Facebook, you have Facebook Messenger, you have WhatsApp, you have Instagram as well. These are all associated with Facebook. And it's social media of predominant use inside Burma. And that was the way that the Burmese people were communicating with the outside world, and actually even the way that we are even able to have these discussions. The internet has been cut off already twice by the Myanmar military. I believe that we'll see this switching on and switching off of the internet in days to come as well. So far as I understand, there is going to be a general strike tomorrow from the general public. Already today, we've seen in excess of 50,000 people gathering for mass protests. And at some point, I do believe that the military, I mean, we've seen it already today in your report you mentioned in Myawaddy, there was firing of rubber bullets against protesters. I do believe that that is going to scale up, and we will see a standoff, a violent standoff between the military and the people.
Commentator Mabrur Ahmed, the Director of Restless Beings, an international human rights organizations, coming to us live from London. Thank you so much for joining us.